Hey, it's Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Monday. It's August 8th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and it felt like it was a really big downtrend day. However, you can see that on the daily chart, this is a look at our daily chart with the envelope bands and, of course, our channels and trends and so forth. And you can see where we bounced off. This was Friday's trading where we bounced off, confirmed that trend line. When I wouldn't go long. I wouldn't be looking to get long up into this resistance because there's really strong resistance here. And of course we got a measured leg right here based on this first leg. So and we're still severely overbought. Doesn't mean if during the trading day if you get a trend working up you don't want to buy. Just be careful when you get to these important support and resistance areas, especially resistance on the way up, because you could run into some problems. But even though this felt like a really big down day because we traded much lower off of the highs, we actually still closed higher today than we did Friday. So, I mean, and that's a kind of a doji range type day. So there's not much change here at all in where prices closed. And you can see we've opened the next day, and right now we're outside of this uh, channel. We could still close back inside it, but um, I mean, the only thing I could assume is we're still pushing for this target, this measured move. Um, we've met every other target so far. We could sell off here at any point, but this market, even though it seems like every day it's going to sell off, and it does sell off from the highs, it doesn't really sell off to the low side. We we just can't maintain these highs because of the resistance up here. Lots of selling coming in at these prices, so the market's going to will attempt to test resistance a few times, and after a few, if it eventually can't go higher, it's going to go lower. And I'd still believe the path of least resistance is down, but it doesn't mean that we don't have more room to the upside yet. I mean, we could actually trade from here and come up and test these next uh, resistance area up here, which is going to be closer to, let's just see where that is, just draw our line on there. And that's going to put us up near 4,300. So that's a good 150 points or so higher than where we are now. So uh, we'll just have to see. But I don't see anything here that says, I mean, this is looking like some topping action, but we may push through there. So never count the market out. Just be careful going long or short out of this stuff, because you can get trapped in this. I mean, we know what congestion does. This is just congestion right here. We're just working sideways because we can't go higher, but yet it's not really selling off either. One thing I can tell you is that we've opened outside that trend line, so we'll see where prices trade from here. Overnight, I wouldn't put too much stock into the overnight price action, and we could trade way down and recover that before the night's over, and it's just a stem sticking down there, and which basically means nothing. So it's where we close. But anyway, let's flip over to the intraday chart, go through the trades, and we'll wrap today. Okay, interesting day. As you can see, we had this spike and channel up, and then we just kind of worked sideways. Then we had this spike down into a channel, and then we had a spike and channel down. So as strong as it was early, it was much stronger, or strong as it was to the upside early on, it was even stronger to the downside until we went flat. And we actually, like I said, we actually closed. Here's this dashed red line is the close from Friday. So we actually closed up. I mean, you can see it looks like we've gapped down here after the open. So this is probably short covering right here, right at the close. People didn't want to carry their shorts overnight because they're afraid of a rally. So some short covering, and you can see when I zoom in here, we've gapped over. We were trading much lower, but we've recovered some of that. And we will probably fill that gap before it's over. I'm not sure where this stem's at here on that final close, but anyway, you can see it here. Early on, it was up until about 9 o'clock, and then it was I would call this mostly sideways until it sold off right here. And it was really way too steep, and then it kind of leveled off into this flatter before we had a close outside. And we never retested the high of this channel up here, and we never retested the lows of this channel. And there's another way you could have looked at this. You could have looked at this like, it's probably more like that right there. So maybe there's a close and a new high and we sold off. But you can't discount this channel here either. I mean, that's the way I saw it. But doesn't mean this one's not right either. So we'll put it on there. I mean, this one, you do get the close and two legs up to a new high, and then it sells off. So, but again, you clearly see this is confirmed, and you can see it fitting both the midline and the highs and the lows until we get a close outside and attempted a new high, and this thing sold off strongly. So before it just kind of meandered lower and then just kind of chopped sideways until right at the close. And again, my guess is that's probably just some short covering, people taking their profits because they're afraid what might happen during the overnight. So anyway, let's zoom in here and talk about the trades. 7 o'clock came. I'm trying to remember exactly where it was. And you had to sit tight today. It's right in here somewhere, I thought. Yeah, right in this topping action here. And it just keeps working higher. You don't want to short this, but I don't see any longs there either. So you just have to sit tight, and I don't think you want to short this way up there, because you see every time you tried to short it, it went higher again. It runs all the way down, back down to the trend line almost in one move there. Bounces. It gives you a high or low right here. This is technically, by the counts, a second entry, and you could say it's off the key entry point, but look at that congestion right there. Let me zoom in a little more. You can see all that sideways. I'd wait. You get a high or low here, but unfortunately, the signal bar is no good, and we don't even get through the EMA. Then we test the EMA again, then we test the EMA a third time, and really there's just resistance right across here. So technically, this is a triple test. You might go short right there. You could also call that a second entry short. There's plenty of room down here to the lows. Problem is you got that trend line right there. Again, I didn't really play it that way, but you can't argue with it if you draw it there. But you could see, you only had one touch at the highs, and then we couldn't get back up there anymore. So anyway, you might look at that as a triple test and take that. I don't think I'd trade that as an engulfing bar. I'd wait for it to close. It's real close where it closed in the top, the bottom 1/3. There's actually a triple test across this bottom here. I didn't mark it either, but there's plenty of room there. Technically, I should have at least made that one green. The problem is there's just not a lot of room back to the midline and the upper side here, and you might turn down there. It's just hard to know. I just think in this sideways here, you'd want a high or low or something, and you just don't get it. It just takes off. And notice it does make that may be a double bottom, I'm not sure. 60-50, and this one's 60. So technically it is a little bit of a high or low, but those are mostly just stems down there, and all the closes are pretty equal. So my opinion is I'd wait on a high or low there. If you took that trade, I wouldn't beat you up too much about it, but I just think it's risky. I mean, that's a huge sell-off right there, and it's hard to understand why it didn't take off when it got to the trend line here, if this trend line is truly in play. So it makes you wonder if maybe this is over and we're not going lower. So it's just hard to want to buy that right there, in my opinion, the way I saw it. So, but anyway, we run up. You get a close outside here, but it's not real convincing in a new high. But notice they run it up one more time to a higher high. And then you got a second entry short, way away from the EMA, big bearish reversal type bar. I like that one. and of course it bounces here and comes back again. Um, there's a failed second entry short there, but I don't, that's just too sideways. You actually get a break of this green channel working up here. You get a first entry and you get a second entry, and then you get a reversal right there. And it's also a little congestion, and that's like a breakout pullback long. So I like, if it breaks higher there, they're going to trap some traders, and we're probably going to push to a new high. So I like that one. Here we're just chopping sideways again. You do get a triple test here after a break of this and a new high. And if you're looking at the Cayenne, there's been a break and a couple of legs up to a new high. This is just going sideways. At this point, the low here would actually be right here. This thing, it just expands by a measured move later on. And so I think it was like right in here. So that's why I just expanded it. But originally the range is here, and this is a triple test. You could call that a second entry. It is two legs up, but you're not really looking for second entries when you're going sideways like that. And it is past time for correction. There's plenty of room back to the EMA, so I like that one. Just trying to get a quick scalp out of it. Maybe you catch a high, and then you get a second entry short right here after we broke lower. And this is a lower high off of this, so I like that one too. Again, just to get a scalp. And if we get a measured move equal to the width of this, maybe it comes all the way down here. The problem is I went back and forth. I almost wanted to make this one green because this was the support before. But when we push through like that, you got to wonder if it's not a midline and that there's not a measured distance here. And that's what it turns out to be. Of course, you don't know that for sure right here. And you could almost argue that this is confirmed, and if so, we're above the midline here. Although we are coming off the highs, and the odds are we're probably going to go lower. So this one's mixed. I read it as a red, but you could argue easily for that to be green. And probably if you look at it like an average chart reader, you'd probably mark that green. So I'm going to change that one. And this is just too congested. Don't enter in this. It does drop down. And look where it bounces right off that trend line on the flatter kind of bluish gray channel. And then you come back and you get a higher low right here. And you could actually call that a failure. It doesn't set up like a failure, but most likely that's going to act like a trap and run back up real fast. And so I like that one off that key entry point. Boom, off it runs up pretty quickly. You can tell it was a trap by how this bar did. And you actually get a higher low here, but there's too much resistance across there to take that higher low. And then there's a reversal here again, but there's just a lot of resistance in a midline right there. It would have worked, but you can see it turns down really quickly. And again, I don't think you can go short right there either. It runs down, you get a close outside. And you actually get a triple test. Notice you made the low, you test it once, you test it twice, and this is a second entry long. First entry, technically it's not because it breaks higher again right here on this little inside bar, but it still looks like two legs back to me. It's a triple test is the main thing, and it's a nice bullish bar. And you're expecting prices to try to make a new high here. Unfortunately, it doesn't get there, and I don't think you can go short in here. And the next thing you know, you're rocketing down. Let me add some color here because you've got a short-term trend channel, and then you got the larger one here. It does come back to the trend line right here, but it's really hard to know that still right there. I believe that's probably valid, but it's just hard to know. I mean, you can see how it's still fitting right down through there, and then you get the close outside, and it's rocketing to a new low. But I don't think you can confirm that to say, hey, that's definitely off the trend line. It's just the first entry, but you could say, hey, it's a failed break out of a little congestion area, and you're looking for a new low anyway. But I think you're really pushing your luck to do that. So I wouldn't take a trade there. And then you drop on down here and you're just, again, chopping sideways, and lots of the bars are just getting, usually they get wide and then they get narrower. This is kind of backwards. They start off narrow and they get wider and wider, but you still don't get a very good setup to go short there, unfortunately. There's a second entry right here. Technically it makes a new low there, but it's still 2 legs back, but it doesn't get back to the trend line, doesn't get back to the EMA. It's just kind of in no man's land. So again, I just don't think you can enter. I mean, it's a very nice move down that you get absolutely zero chance. Same thing here. It gives you another big move down and really zero chance. We'll talk about one little opportunity here, but you do get the close outside, a couple legs to a new low, and then you're working higher. This one is tempting. I didn't mark it, but you could argue for that to be green as a higher low. Not quite back to the trend line, but you're trying to pick a bottom by doing that. Even though you got a break and new low, that's a really strong move down. So you got to be real careful with it. I think if you measure that too, I'd probably measure that as one leg. And then there's your next leg. And you can see it's way more than you really had a measured leg here, and then they push one more time down. So that gives you a lot more information that, hey, we're kind of overdone, that maybe we'll at least run back to the EMA. And you can see how it finds resistance there, and that's why you got to be careful sometimes. Do you have enough room back to the EMA since it's a downtrend and you're semi trying to pick the bottom? This is definitely a more advanced trade. If you're not a real good chart reader, don't try to pick in these. Just stick with the trend and wait for something to change. And of course, we do drop down here. You could argue this is a double top right here. There's no break anyway, so you could still look at this as a first entry and this is a second entry and say, hey, maybe there's a failure here, but it's so far down the trend line, but it is off the trend line, and it's so far away from the EMA, and usually your reversals are off of those. But prices generally come back and test the breakout area or the push-through area of a midline or an EMA and all that. And you can see where, look here where we pushed through the EMA, we came back and tested it and then went lower. We pushed through the midline here, came back and tested it. My line's not quite touching it, but you could probably adjust this just a hair and it'd probably be more accurate. But that's an attempt to come back and retest that. And you could say, hey, that's a failed second entry, and the reason it didn't get back to the EMA is because of the midline and the trend line right here is holding. So, you don't have much room to scalp out, and it's the low of the day, so it's really dangerous. I didn't mark it, but it's just something to look at there. And of course, we run back up. We got the green channel running up, and you turn down, you try to go higher here. This is basically a second entry. Notice the new low. And you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry, but it's really kind of a chance to go high at a little congestion area there too. So on a failure, so it didn't look like it was going to act like a trap, and then it kind of dropped on down. So it's another one that I just liked it because it's a second entry, and we really just had another big bearish move down. And we do bounce. We make a new low here, and we bounce. There's a second entry here, but it's below the EMA, sideways. You do get the higher low right here, and it actually breaks lower and turns up. I like going long if it breaks above that, because it's going. The shorts are going to have to run, and we're probably headed back to the upper trend line. And you can see this is a little bit, even though this is mostly trending down now, look how we're above the EMA, we're below it. We're above it, we're below it, we're above it, we're below it, we're above it. And we're kind of working back up. That's still mixed trading. And so you could trade one like that that's not real steep both ways. Now, if this EMA was straight down and everything's below the EMA, then just stick with the shorts. Or when it's like this and the EMA straight up and everything's above it, stick with the longs. But when it's going back and forth like this, then you can't argue that it's not mixed trading, and that's telling you you could probably trade it both ways. You could be a little more lenient on your trade direction. So that second entry turns out to be a great move right there. It drops way all the way back down here, testing the lows, and it tries it a few times. We actually get going sideways. You get a triple test here with a big bearish bar and plenty of room to get out. And then finally you make a new low. Notice how we're making lower highs, and even though it's sideways there, we're still making lower highs and lower lows. And you make that new low, and you get a first entry, and you get a second entry on a retest of the breakout area. So we're probably going to move a measured move here, and that would be what you're looking for on that entry right there on that second entry. You could also call that, I may not take that on a second entry only, but the fact that there's a new high here and it's a first entry, second entry long that fails, and the second entry short, and notice how close we got to that measured move. So there's a good chance we could move a measured move there. And so I like that trade for that reason. And then of course it runs back up, it fails, and you bounce off of it right there. Then you get a second entry long and a triple test. Notice that you tested the support once, you tested it twice, and you come back again. You could kind of argue that that's one move there, but it's still a chance to get long back in the range after testing it. I mean, we really tested it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's the 6th bar. So there's a good chance we're going to go higher there. And it does go higher, but it just turns down and runs back down, and it does. Notice how you went further than the measured move, then when it comes back down, it bounces right off of it. So obviously prices wanted to test that level one more time to be sure it was going to hold, and when it does, it goes higher. I don't see any longs there I'd want, and that takes us into 230. So yeah, it's another one of those days where you got some really good movement and not a lot of really good trades. I mean, I hate when we get these kind of days where you get a move like this and you just don't even get a chance to really take a good, safe trade to get into it. But there's going to be days like that, especially when you're topping out, when we could be topping out here, because the market's nervous. The buyers want to keep buying and want to keep the market moving higher. Everybody knows it should be going down, but the sellers aren't coming in, so people are just nervous and they're afraid. And so you see a lot of this mixed trading in both directions. And as bearish as that looks, again, we closed much higher for the day than we did for Friday. I will say much higher. It's not that much higher, but it's what, 4, 5, 7 points higher than where we closed Friday. And so we closed up basically. So even though it looks like we had a big sell-off, but that was because we rallied real strongly first. So anyway, I'm not going to beat around the bush. There's not much you can say about today. It's just not a super easy trading day. So anyway, maybe tomorrow will be better, but I'm going to wrap it up for today. We'll be back again tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.